It's a death mystery in Texas. This young girl, just 19 years old, a college student, found dead on the street hours after a big college football game. Police say she fell from more than a dozen stories above from an apartment complex. Police also say they're not investigating what happened as a homicide, but this girl's mom says there is much more to this story and she has proof. She claims her daughter was killed, and she says police are not doing enough to find out what really happened. We're on the case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Stewart. Hi guys, before we move on, I need to talk about the single biggest financial development that is shaping everything we know about money. Central banks, they are hoarding and purchasing physical gold at a pace that we haven't seen in decades. Gold is up 40% in the past year, and experts say it's not stopping. So, how do you get in without dropping thousands up front? Acre Gold makes it simple to own physical gold without expense. With subscriptions from $30 to $250 per month, anyone can start by making monthly payments at your own pace. And when you reach the price of your bar, Acre Gold ships it right to your door. Real gold that you can have, save, or pass down. So secure your wealth and take control of your future. Start today at getacregold.com/onthecase. This story is a parent's worst nightmare, getting that phone call that your child's dead. What is reportedly making the situation even worse for a family from Texas is they say that police are not doing enough to investigate what they believe happened. Now, this is the girl who lost her life. Her name, Brianna Aguilera. She was a sophomore at Texas A&M. Her mom just made a social media post that is taking this case to a new level, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But here's what we know about what allegedly happened last weekend when she was in Austin, Texas for a major football game. Brianna's Texas A&M Aggies were taking on their bitter rivals, the Texas Longhorns. Now, if you don't follow college football, that is one of the biggest games of the year, and it's also a massive party scene. Brianna apparently went to a tailgate for the game. It's called the Lone Star Showdown on Saturday night. It's unclear if she actually went into the stadium. This game kicked off around 6:30 at night, but hours later, 1 o'clock in the morning, a couple hours after the game ended, Brianna was found dead outside an apartment building on a street by someone who was just walking by. Now, investigators say they do not believe the 19-year-old died as a result of foul play. Her mom told KSAT-TV that detectives have told her that she died after falling 17 stories from an apartment above. I want you to take a look here, and this is from Google Earth. You can see what the apartment building looks like in Austin at the address that police say all of this happened. You can see the balconies on the outside of the building. Now, detectives to this point believe that Brianna jumped, but Brianna's mom is now speaking out saying that just doesn't make sense and there has to be more to this story. Not only did her mom tell KSAT that her daughter was not suicidal, she says that her daughter's dream was to go to Texas A&M. She was living that dream. She had one day hoped to become a lawyer, so it just doesn't make sense. But she also says there are parts to that story that she's being given by police that aren't adding up. Now, her mom says she first knew something was wrong Saturday night when she tried to call her daughter after the game and Brianna didn't answer. Now, that game would have ended around 10 o'clock local time. Again, it was a 6:30 p.m. kickoff on Saturday night, and Brianna's body was found a couple hours after the game ended at 1 o'clock in the morning on a street outside that apartment building. Her mom told KSAT that she found out her daughter's body was in the morgue around 4 o'clock on Sunday in the afternoon. Just a horrific way for a parent to find out that their daughter has died. Now, the mom also says that officers have her daughter's cell phone. It is unclear what that cell phone shows as far as what police have said, but her mom is claiming the cell phone could provide some clues about what was going on around the time Brianna died. It appears that Brianna went to a post-game after party at that apartment complex in Austin, that tall apartment building with the balconies. Now, her mom says that 15 people were in the apartment when Brianna died. Brianna's mom also says that police are not answering her questions. She told KSAT, quote, "There are a lot of inconsistencies with the story. He told me," she's talking about the police officer, "that she jumped. And then he told me that the friends said they didn't know her whereabouts. It's unclear what the layout was of the apartment where this party was going on. Now, the mom then goes on to say that her daughter may have been in some sort of confrontation shortly before she died. Here's what she said, quote, "There is a fight that happened between my daughter and another girl, and they were all staying in the same apartment that I have actual text messages from, and the detective just disregarded them." Now, police have not commented on that part of the investigation. Now, it is unclear why police have said they don't believe Brianna is the victim of a homicide or something more than her jumping off of an apartment building in the early hours of the morning. What proof do police have that this is what went down? Because they're not saying it's an open investigation. They're saying that they don't believe it is a homicide investigation, but they have said they are still looking into what happened. Now, police told local media there are no details that show suspicious circumstances surrounding Brianna's death. An autopsy will confirm her cause of death. Toxicology reports could also show what was in her system when she died. Now, here's what Brianna's mom wrote on Facebook, and this is really what took this case to a new level beyond the fact that we are talking about the tragic loss of someone who was just 19 years old, had big plans in their life. Now, this is what her mom wrote on Facebook, quote, "This was not accidental. Someone killed my Bree and gave all the group of friends a lot of time to come up with the same story. My daughter would not jump 17 stories from a building, and to be labeling this as a suicide is insane. My daughter loved life and was excited to graduate and pursue her career in law. Austin PD and the detective is not doing his job. How is it that certain friends left immediately and the person who was living at the apartment complex vacated her apartment ASAP?" End quote. She also posted, "Mia Moore, we will get justice." Now, Austin police have not commented on what went on inside the apartment before Brianna died. Now, as this story has been getting a ton of attention, we have seen many people supporting Brianna's family. There's a GoFundMe that has raised more than $30,000, and it writes, quote, "Our hearts are shattered in an effort to ease the financial burden on Brianna's mom and loved ones during this unimaginable time. We are asking family, friends, and all who or knew of Bree to consider offering a donation. If you are unable to give, we humbly ask that you keep Brianna and her family in your thoughts and prayers." Now, it also says the details surrounding what happened next remain unclear, and her mother is awaiting answers. End quote. Now, I also want to read for you the statement that we received from the Austin Police Department, and this is all that they are saying at this point. It says, on Saturday, November 29th, 2025, at 12:47 a.m., so around 1 o'clock in the morning, Austin police officers responded to a report of an unresponsive individual at 2101 Rio Grande Street. When officers arrived on scene, they located an adult female who was not responding. The individual was pronounced deceased on scene at 12:57 a.m. At this time, the incident is not being investigated as a homicide, and there are no indications of suspicious circumstances. The cause of death will be determined by the Travis County Medical Examiner's Office. The investigation remains ongoing. Joining us now to talk a little bit more about this case and the circumstances surrounding it, which are certainly interesting. We'll see if they're suspicious moving forward. Retired Detective Commander Will Svilar, always great to have you on Law and Crime from the Chicago Police Department. What stands out to you thus far about what we know about what happened to 19-year-old Brianna Aguilera?
Well, what stands out is we don't know much. It looks like the police department's not releasing too much, but they did release that they don't believe foul play is expected, which to me is a little odd this early in the investigation, unless there's some things going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. So that strikes me as a little odd.
Yeah, here's the statement. I actually just got it in from the Austin Police Department. It says, when officers arrived on the scene, they located an adult female who was not responding. The individual was pronounced deceased on scene at 12:57 a.m. At this time, the incident is not being investigated as a homicide, and there are no indications of suspicious circumstances. The cause of death will be determined by the Travis County Medical Examiner's Office, and the investigation remains ongoing. There's still, if I'm diving into that, and I might be looking into something too much, there's still an "at this time" and the investigation remains ongoing. What does that tell you about what could be going on behind the scenes in this case?
Well, like in all death investigations and homicides, you're waiting for a medical examiner to make a determination. In some cases, the medical examiner is going to wait for the police department to come up with their investigation before they'll make a determination. Now, I don't care what happened. If there is a young girl at the bottom of a 17-story building, that's foul play. Now, I'm not saying that it was criminal play, but it's not normal. Something happened up there. And what they're doing now is they got to talk to everybody that was upstairs in that apartment. What time did she get there? What was her state of mind? Who was there? And was there a fight? Like the mom said, that there possibly was a fight between two girls. That all has to be hashed out.
Because the mom too, because on one hand, we don't know if there is surveillance video. If someone has like a Ring doorbell camera inside an apartment, I don't know if they would, or like a dog, camera, something like that. I feel like we would know, or that would be passed along to the mom at some point. But if there's no video and police believe that she jumped, how do you prove that?
Indeed. How do you prove that? I mean, jumping, falling, being thrown, you're not going to find out much from the remains, unfortunately, because that's serious trauma when you depart 17 floors and land on the cement. It's got to be brought in through interviews with the people in the apartment. Now, I know that there was a possible allegation that they got their story together. You will never get 15 people to tell the same story, no matter what. I can assure you on that. And what 15 are going to say if somebody killed this poor girl? How many of these people are going to cover up for one person? It just doesn't make sense. But they have to conduct all those interviews to get to the bottom of it.
At this point, as police are saying, they believe that she took her own life, that she jumps off of this, 17-story balcony. It's like, she had apparently gone to the game, and I think that probably would have ended around 10 o'clock Central Time in Austin, and then they go back to this apartment, and something happens at this point. What are those conversations like? If there were 15 people in that apartment, maybe people who witnessed a fight, as a detective, and you have all these different people, how do you figure out who was around her at the time that it happened, who last saw her? How do you piece together that timeline?
Individual interviews. You never do a group interview. You don't interview two people at once. You take every one of them, and it's going to take time, and you're going to use your resources, and you're going to interview each one of those people. Now, with your initial interview, you're going to get information about certain things. Now you got to interview people again. If there's inconsistencies or if there's discrepancies in their story, you're going to interview these people again. You're going to say, well, wait a minute. 3 people said this, but you said this. So it's not just one interview. It's several interviews, and there's things that come out of the initial ones that you go back on and you follow up on.
The other part too that the mom criticized, and I'm sure it's difficult for police as they're trying to figure out what was going on. And to your point, though police departments are definitely overwhelmed, I would say, trying to figure out what happened to a woman who fell 17 stories is something that they're going to put their best effort into it. But the mom had said she criticized that those people were allowed to leave the scene. How do you handle that? If that's actually the case, where you have 15 people, how do you handle a scene like that? Especially after a bystander seems to have found the girl, found Brianna on the street, which you just think for that person as well, just the scene they came upon around 1 o'clock in the morning.
Well, here's the strange thing about that entire, did she disappear into a room by herself and then nobody saw her for a while? Because if somebody saw her go over the railing, it doesn't make sense to me that they're not going to make an outcry.
Right.
It doesn't make sense to me that someone who's walking by happens to see this girl. And again, how do they know what window she came out of? How do they know, unless they got this through interviews, unless somebody said, you know what, we did see her at the party, and then we didn't see her. So as far as letting people leave, you can detain people for a reasonable amount of time, but you cannot restrict their movements past a reasonable amount of time. And that's, in all legal terms and all legal things, it's always reasonable. What's reasonable? And in a situation like that, you could have held them and talked to them for a while. You don't know who was there when they got there. There could have been 4 people left.
How do you figure out? So the mom believes, and she apparently has text messages, which I don't know if I don't believe those have been released, but she has text messages that show that there was some sort of confrontation with another girl at this party. How do you handle that approach? If you know that this person fell, maybe there's no evidence of any sort of suspicious, well, I guess it is suspicious, but any sort of someone pushing her out a window or something like that. How do you handle that story and not make it more than than maybe what it is if it was just girls after a football game. Maybe they had been drinking during the day. It's an issue that they were squashing, or it was something more than that.
Again, you're going to have to do detective work on this. You're going to have to determine who that person was that she had the conflict with. You're going to have to look at those text messages and see what the contents were. Does it seem like it was, I mean, if it's an ongoing fluid thing where there's an active fight going on, is she going to be able to text her mom and say, hey, I'm having a problem with this girl? Or does she get to the party and go, hey, you know what? This girl I had a problem with at this party too. So you have to analyze what those text messages are, and then you have to find out who this person is and interview her as well. Again, if there's two people that go into a room with a balcony and one person comes out, that's a problem. So you're going to have to determine how all of that went down, and it's through detective work and interviews. And emotion, as emotional as this can be for the family, obviously, emotions can't play in this. If you're a detective, you have to do a proper investigation and try to keep your emotions out of it.
That kind of leads to my next point, because I don't think that there's any parent that would ever want to believe, especially when it comes out of nowhere, that their child might be struggling with a mental health issue. And we don't know anything about Brianna's background other than she was, proud to be a Texas A&M Aggie, and she wanted to be a lawyer, according to her mom. And so many people, from just the reaction we've seen, were shocked that this would happen. But at the same time, now you have a mom saying that she believes that someone killed her. Like, she put that on Facebook. How do you, from the police perspective, kind of handle that part of it where the mom says, hey, I think there is something more going on here. I might even have text messages to show you that something's going on. How do you balance that part with maybe the evidence that you have on scene? Doesn't seem like, at least according to police at this point, that there were any sort of circumstances beyond a girl that they believe jumped from the 17th floor of this apartment building.
So when I say that you shouldn't have emotions during the investigation, I mean the investigative part of it. When you're dealing with victims and victims' families, you better have empathy. You better show compassion because you probably feel it. I mean, I felt it every time I spoke to a family, regardless of the circumstances. You have to try to tell them the facts, but you also have to keep in mind that as a parent, if something like this happens to your child as a parent, especially if you think that there possibly could have been some mental health issues that you missed, what a devastating thing to feel. That maybe I have some responsibility. Maybe I could have done something to help this girl or protect this or prevent this from happening. So it's a balance. You have to come through here. Listen, this is what the investigation says. This is what the evidence suggests. I'm very sorry, but this is what it looks like.
I think of the Ellen Greenberg case out of Philadelphia, where the family for years has fought to get the case opened and the case to be ruled a murder. And that has been, dissected, the different kind of layers to that story and how it got to the point where authorities in Pennsylvania believe that she had taken her own life. And a big part of the issue that her family has is that when police came, they believe that they didn't do enough on scene. They rule it as a suicide, and then a cleaning crew comes in, cleans up the place, and then that evidence is gone forever. This is a very different situation with someone jumping out of a balcony. But when you have, I guess, the initial officers looking at this and saying, just from my perspective, this is a suicide, what impact does that have on whether this could ever become a homicide and how much work goes into determining what actually happened?
The initial scene is crucial. As a first responder, when you get to the scene initially and it's your call as a beat car or whoever gets the initial call, your responsibility is to aid injured if there's injured people, arrest the suspect if you see evidence of foul play, and protect that crime scene. You do not make a determination. You should never call and say, hey, listen, call the detectives and say, hey, listen, I got a suicide over here. You don't know that. You should protect the crime scene and don't put any thoughts in anybody's head. Let the detectives do their job. There's a reason why they're in the detective division, and that's to do their job. So as a primary responding officer, your responsibility is to protect that crime scene, secure witnesses, and wait for the detectives.
When it comes to the information that you release to the public, and especially now, I mean, this story is getting a lot of attention because the mom has made the statements that she has, and she's very adamant that she believes that her daughter was killed. But police say there's no evidence of that. At the same time, they are saying that they do not believe that this is a homicide. What type of information would you need even if you're not releasing it to the public, to be able to say that we don't believe that she died because someone killed her?
I mean, it can only come through interviews you have with people in the apartment at the time. Unless there is a statement she makes to somebody before she goes into a room. And again, I don't know how the apartment was set up. I don't know where the balcony was. I don't know how any of that went down. But to make, and again, we talked about this earlier, to make a determination early or to release a statement early to say, we don't suspect foul play. That's a pretty big statement considering you're being tight-lipped on everything else. And again, medical examiner doesn't have a finding. I mean, I know what the cause of death is going to be, obviously, but the manner of death is yet to be determined. So to say in a statement, we don't believe there's foul play, they have to have more than what they're releasing to the public as far as the stuff they got at interviews or maybe even some physical evidence.
Hate to be morbid on this, but that is the reality of it. And I know we talked about we're dealing with what was probably a very difficult scene. Are you still able to get a toxicology test? I just think of, you're at a big college football game, probably a lot of drinking throughout the day. That could factor into what transpired at night. Is that something that, through the autopsy and then, being able to take samples, are you able to still figure out what was in her system at the time she died?
Yes. Yes. The organs, there'll be blood, there'll be organs, they'll be able to do an analysis, a toxicology analysis, which is part of every postmortem examination. So yes, you will be able to determine tox.
And then just as you look at these cases, and you think of, I guess, all the different circumstances surrounding it, what led up during the day, the text messages, what goes into a police department's decision about what information you release to the public, especially at this, and I know each police department is you have different protocols, and Austin might keep it tighter to the vest than maybe a police department in Florida would keep it, where you see a sheriff up giving a news conference. What would you make, inside, if you were in the Austin Police Department, about, okay, this mom is kind of questioning the investigation that we've done. Here's the reason that we believe that she took her own life. How do you go about handling that information and whether you release it to the public?
Just like that. I mean, you release a preliminary, and again, most of the preliminary statements you're going to release this is under investigation. You'll say, a woman was found at this time, deceased, unresponsive, investigation remains in progress, which is, like I said, a little surprising. And I don't know if they said that they didn't suspect foul play as maybe pushback to what the mom had to say, but you don't do that. You can't engage in any kind of he said, she said with a victim of a family of a victim. You just got to let the investigation play out and communicate with them. You have to communicate with people, not through the media, not through official channels. You have to go knock on the door, and you have to sit in the room with a victim's family and talk to them and try to make sense of it with them, what happened.
Every city's different, but in a case like this, and I think we will likely know the cause of death, unless something happened in the apartment that we're unaware of, but just based off of where she was found and what they say happened. How long does it typically take, say this had happened in Chicago, to get the results of a final autopsy and a toxicology and all of that?
Tox takes about 6 weeks to come back. You'll be able to know certain things immediately. Tox takes about 6 weeks in Cook County Medical Examiner's office. But as far as cause of death goes, it's going to be blunt trauma due to fall.
If something happened in the apartment, and I'm not saying it did, just to be clear, but if something did happen inside the apartment with a body that fell 17 stories, would you still be able to figure out if that's the case, just based off the condition that it was found after falling that far?
If it's a penetrating injury, for instance, a stab wound or maybe a gunshot wound, you should be able to determine whether or not something like that happened, regardless. I mean, again, it's not, believe me when I tell you, it's not pretty, but there are certain things that happen in trauma, and there's certain things that happen in penetrating injuries like stabbings or shootings, and they're not, and it's not going to hide it.
Yeah, and for people watching, apologize for being morbid, but I think in these types of cases, you have to ask these types of questions because, when questions are being raised about an investigation, I think that is certainly a big part of it. Retired Detective Commander Will Svilar from the Chicago Police Department, always great with helping us kind of go through these stories and figure out what could come next. Thanks for being with us on Law and Crime.
Thanks, Chris.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.